Welcome one and all to Storybox, the place to be if you are a lover of stories, learning, growth, and you want to improve your life. My name is Jay Phantom, and I've made it my purpose to unbox and share the amazing stories from people of every profession all over the world. I am truly grateful that you have decided to listen in today. Now let's journey into the Storybox together and hear more about whose story will be unboxed today. Well, everyone, I am absolutely delighted to welcome Josh Kaufman to the Storybox podcast today. Josh is an author of bestselling author with 3 books, The Personal MBA, Master the Art of Business, The First 20 Hours, How to Learn Anything Fast, which I pretty much need to read, How to Fight a Hydra, Face Your Fears, Pursue Your Ambitions, and Become the Hero You Are Destined to Be. Josh's research focuses on business, entrepreneurship, skill acquisition, productivity, creativity, applied psychology, and practical wisdom. He has been featured as a #1 best-selling author in business and money, as ranked by Amazon, and his books have sold over 500,000 copies worldwide. You've been featured in the New York Times. This list is massive. New York Times, the BBC, the Wall Street Journal, the Atlantic, Fortune, Forbes, Time, BusinessWeek, Wired, Fast Company, Financial Times, HarvardBusiness.org, the World Economic Forum, Inside Hire, Ed, Hijacker, MarketWatch, CNN's, CCTV, so many more. Josh, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the Storybox podcast today.
Jay, thanks so much for the invitation. It's great to hang out with you today.
Seriously, man, it's an absolute honor to have you. And like I said to you before, I watched probably about the first 1 or 2 minutes of your TED talk and didn't want to finish because I just had to reach out to you and like ask you questions for myself. I didn't want to be spoiled, if that makes sense to anyone that is listening. Before we dive into all those kinds of questions, I have one question that I love asking people to start off with, and that is, what does success look like to you?
So success for me is working on projects that are interesting with people that I enjoy and I want to work with, or I choose to work with. And then doing that in a way that helps me care for myself and care for my family. So we'll get into a lot of the backstory, but I have a background working for massive companies and made a very deliberate decision about 12 years ago to do my own thing. And part of the motivating focus was I wanted to spend more time with my family and I wanted to do cool projects with people that I choose. And 12 years in, so far so good.
So when was that moment? Was it like a catalyst moment that you sort of realized like what actually happened to make you realize that, hey, hang on a minute, I want to do my own thing. I want to spend more time with my family. Were you fearful as well when you actually decided to take that leap?
Yeah, I remember the moment vividly. This is not an exaggeration. I was sitting in a meeting to prepare for a meeting, to prepare for a meeting, to prepare for a meeting. And I looked at what the next 20 or 30 years of my life would be, and it only got worse from there. In terms of where I would be spending the vast majority of my focus, energy, time, and effort, and also looking a little bit into the future. I was in my early 20s at the time, and I saw people who had the job that if I did well and got a promotion, I saw what their life would look like, and a lot of times it was kissing their kids on the forehead before they woke up on their way out the door to work, and kissing their kids on the forehead when they got home at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And I decided that if I didn't change something, that is what I could expect. The structure, the environment of working in a large company, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of people relying on you. There's a lot of time-dependent processes. And if you're the person in charge, when you work for a large company, if there's a trade-off between what the business needs to get done on a timeline and what you need on an individual level, for better or worse, the people who succeed in that environment are the ones who choose to make the trade-off in favor of the company time and time again. And I decided that that's not something that I wanted for me. There are many ways to succeed in this world. And I didn't at that point know exactly what I was going to do. I just knew that if I stayed on that path, I was not going to be happy with the end result of it.
So how did you actually leave that place? Was it sort of like this instantaneous, I'm going to start writing books? Did you actually have a plan, or was it just, I'm going to leave and see where it takes me?
Yeah, no, I had a bunch of side projects going on at the same time. And so there was always a part of me is like, I think at some point in the future, I'm going to want to do my own thing. I don't know what that is yet, but I was looking for it. I had a couple of very small service-based businesses growing up in high school and early college. And that gave me a little bit of service consulting, advising experience. And that was really helpful. So the personal MBA came about, which was the first book that I ended up writing. That came about as one of these side projects.
Oh, wow.
I got my start in the corporate world through essentially an internship program. And everybody around me that I was going to be working with had graduated from an MBA program, oftentimes a top 15 MBA program. And for me, not having that experience, it's a little intimidating. Like, I want to go into this job. I want to do good work, hold my own in meetings, all of that. And so the personal MBA started as a project of, I didn't need to quit my job, go back to school. I just wanted to learn all of the things that will hopefully, theoretically, make you a successful business person. And so as a side project, I had my day job, and then I was reading and researching on the side and found a lot of the ideas that were most useful came up over and over and over again. So I read over the course of the project, I really wish I would have kept an exact count, easily over 1,000 business books.
Wow.
And when you read that much, you see the same ideas come up over and over and over again. It's like, okay, there's a core of knowledge here that's very valuable, very important, and very beneficial. Wouldn't it be great for people learning business to just learn that first? And when you have a solid scaffold of principles to work from, everything else becomes easier to understand or easier to do. And so the personal MBA evolved from this huge research project into, what is that core set of business principles that everybody should know? What are the things that work at the largest companies in the world and at the smallest companies in the world? Solo person just getting started. And so the first edition of the personal MBA came out in very late 2010, and now it's 2020. And so the latest edition, the 10th anniversary edition of the personal MBA, just came out. It's the third edition of the book. And the theory was, okay, you put all of these fundamental principles in one place. This is a great introduction to business, no matter who you are or what you do. That's the theory. It's wonderful when things that work in theory actually work in practice, because the book has done very well. So we just got confirmation from the publisher that the personal MBA has sold 900,000 copies worldwide.
Wow.
And the whole purpose of the 10th anniversary edition is to set the book up to be a valuable resource for the coming decade. So hopefully in 2030, 2040, it is still the best introduction of core business principles that exists.
That's incredible, man. Congratulations on the huge achievement. What I'm curious about is master the art of business. Now, why did you call it mastery? And why did you include mastery in an art in the same thing as business? Is there such a thing as actually mastering business, or like, because we look at all the high profile business people, right? And we would class them as, masters in their field. But what does that actually mean? Is there like an art form to it, or what do you mean by how to master the art of business?
Yeah. So the art goes back to, there are certain things in business that you can do too much of or too little of. And so this is an idea that goes all the way back, believe it or not, to Aristotle,
Mm,
who said something along the lines of virtue is the mean between two extremes.
mhm,
And so, if think of something like courage, right? So courage is something that we can all aspire to. The absence of courage is cowardice. That's a bad thing, something to be avoided. The polar opposite, so having way, 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 way too much, is hubris, getting into situations that you should not be in
mm,
because you are so overconfident in your abilities or your ability to make a difference in this particular area. So you're trying to shoot for the middle point between those two extremes. I think a lot of the art in business is understanding these fundamental principles, which really do govern what businesses are, how they work, what it means to do it well.
mm,
And then finding that middle point of focusing enough on certain things, but not too much or too little. And what you see over and over again with successful business people is they pay an enormous amount of attention to these fundamental concepts because they really are the definition of what it means to be successful and do business well. But then they're also very perceptive and willing to experiment to find that middle point between too much and not enough.
mm.
And so I think this makes, to me, business one of the most fascinating areas of human existence because it's so multidisciplinary and it's so important, to the function of our society, to our day-to-day lives. Doing business well means adding very real value to the world, and in doing so, supporting yourself and your loved ones. There's a virtuous cycle there that's very unique. And so, yeah, I like to think about business is something that you can master in the sense of understanding what's important and having knowledge and experience to do it well. And then the art is finding that middle point between
Mm.
not enough and too much.
I like that, man, because business in the economic sense sort of helps run the country. I mean, small business does that. And when we look at who's actually running the company and who's like the owner or the founder and everything like that, you got to look at their life and actually what they do with their life, because that also translates to how they run their business, like
Mhm.
values, if they actually are balanced. Because if they're not balanced, then I highly doubt that their business is actually going to be balanced either. It's
Right.
sort of like, you know, for a small business, especially, because that's pretty much, if it's just you and some other employee, then you got to learn how to manage you first, then your employee, then the business. And
Yep.
I like how you mentioned the balance there. I think that's a very important lesson. And I don't really think I've heard it described in the sense of business that way, but it's so cool.
Yeah.
Have you
I think,
noticed? So you go.
go ahead. So I think in terms, one of the a tangible thing we can think about, which is very, very timely right now, is the idea of resilience.
Mm,
And so there's a certain amount of having additional resources, having insurance, having multiple lines of business, all of those things that can help when unexpected things happen, and unexpected things happen often, can help us really weather the storm in important ways. And so you can think of resilience as being this middle point, because if you're not resilient enough, so think, to financial market crashes like the Great Recession of 2008, all of these banks had borrowed a bunch of money and it had taken effectively insurance
mm,
from each other. And then when one domino falls, they all fall. So that's a lack of resilience, too much risk, not enough planning ahead. But then there's an opposite extreme of that too, of, if you're sitting on millions or billions of dollars in cash in the bank, those are resources that can be put into investing in the business, making new products, hiring more staff, improving the experience. So there's a middle point between not being prepared enough and being over prepared for everything. And there are costs in both ways. And so I think what we're seeing a lot now, particularly with the current global situation, pandemic, et cetera, is that the companies that are doing well right now are the ones that have navigated that trade-off in a very skillful way. They're not over leveraged. They're not overstaffed, because staffing is usually the most costly part of the business. And then, if things go sideways, as they have this past year, that can be a very real liability. And they're prepared enough that as new opportunities have arisen out of the changing environment around us, they have the money and the personnel and the capacity to change their business operations to take advantage of the new environment. So yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that you can always look at yourself or your business operations and say, am I prepared to weather changes, unexpected changes, if they come, when they come? And am I taking full advantage of the opportunities that are in front of us right now? And how you balance that trade-off will play a very large part in your success over a very long period of time.
Kind of like forecasting in a sense, but also being prepared.
Yeah.
Like as best you can. Like if you go through a period, say for example, like you mentioned, the Great Depression of 2008, and what happened with that, we're actually at the moment we are behind schedule for an actual depression again. That's what I've heard at least. But you see those market trends and everything that's happening around in the world at the moment, and the economy is doing the best it possibly can to stay afloat during the time. I see business people all the time, like the most resilient business owners that I associate myself with and have seen are the ones that run cafes and restaurants, especially during this period right now, because they don't know, without customers, they're not going to be able to employ staff members to go food and what have you. But I like how you mentioned the resilience of it. And what I want to ask you now, Josh, is this idea of going into business for yourself. And is it something that anyone can learn, or are you actually born to be in business, if that makes sense?
It is absolutely something that anyone can learn. I don't think there are certain people who have, and I'll say, a natural, healthy relationship with risk and experimentation is probably the personality factor that has the most to do with it. And I would say also openness to new experience is a major factor, and conscientiousness. So are you able to sit down, deliver on promises, do work on a consistent basis to deliver value, things of that nature? So I would say, there are certain aspects of personality that are helpful, but are not prerequisites or necessarily defining factors. I think knowledge of business is a skill that anyone can pick up with sufficient exposure. I would put myself into this category. So growing up, I grew up in a small, very small town in the Midwest of the United States. Population round about 200, the proverbial one stoplight town. My exposure to business prior to college was very, very minimal. And so, the corner store and, shops on Main Street, the vast majority of the people that I grew up around in terms of adults working in business, either worked for a small store or worked in like a light manufacturing sort of industry. Businesses were things that people or places people went in order to draw a paycheck. And that was about the extent of what I understood at that time. But there was also if you wanted to make money, there are things that you can do to make money. I spent a good bit of my junior high and high school years mowing my neighbors' lawns. It's not a glamorous business. At that point, it was not a very profitable business. But if there were things that I wanted to do to get money to buy books or whatever, I could. And so that sense of agency of like, this is the thing that people can choose to learn, choose to figure out, was really helpful. So when I got into both the corporate world and then starting my own businesses, treating business as a skill that can be learned by anyone over time is a very empowering way to think about it. Because it doesn't matter who you know, doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter what your prior experience has been. There's a certain set of things that you can understand about business that will make your life very much easier if you know them. So it's a good idea to learn those. Those are the things to learn first. And then business from there, after you have that core knowledge, is really just a matter of effort and experimentation and persistence. If you keep putting your effort and energy in that direction over a long enough period of time, and you experiment and keep doing the things that work and stop doing the things that don't, you will absolutely get there in terms of building something that is profitable, sustaining, and worth your investment of time and energy.
I like how you mentioned persistence there, because it's like a trigger for me. Every time people mention persistence, I have my saying that I live by. And I believe that the ultimate version of success, and if you want to be successful, quote, in business or actually in life, you got to learn this mindset of persistence. You got to tell yourself every single day, I'm going to get up, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to be persistent at trying to achieve the things that I actually want to achieve. Now, if you look at persistence, there's good persistence and there's bad persistence. You can be persistent at all the bad things that aren't really working for your business, but you're so stubborn to actually think that, hang on a minute, I'm right, everyone else is wrong. But if you're persistent at humility and just absolutely being open enough to take advice from people that actually know more in business than what you do, then you can grow, you can learn, you can improve your life. But if you're constantly guarding yourself or pushing away from the good, then you're never going to grow. Your business is going to remain like stagnant at best because you are. So I personally believe that if you actually want to move forward in your life, even if you face struggles, failures, because they are going to come, rejection, you name it, then having that mindset of, okay, today I'm going to get up, I'm going to continue pushing forward, I'm going to be persistent, I'm going to put into practice all the things that I have continued to do every single day up until this point, like whether it's reaching out, whether it's counting finances, all these things in business that are actually good for it, keeping it afloat, and just practicing learning something new. So asking questions. So I think that's like, if you want to be consistent at it, be persistent.
Absolutely.
That's my philosophy.
Yeah, I see so many people, particularly on the entrepreneurship side, people who decide to start a business and they give it a try for a good solid week. They say, well, people aren't knocking down my door. I'm obviously not cut out for this. And that's not how it works. It's never how it works.
No. And if it's one thing that I've learned doing this podcast, if you want to see it as a business, is that most people, when they start a podcast, they sort of quit 6 months in because it's really, really hard work.
Yeah.
It's long hours. And if you're not in that mindset of, why am I doing this? What's my vision? And actually actively working towards your vision, same thing in business. Like your values, your business values. Like if you're going against that, your business isn't going to grow. Like you're constantly fighting something that you don't really need to fight. So instead of going against the grain, go with the grain as best as you possibly can. You got disruptors too. but they've disrupted a certain part of an industry because someone told them that they can't do it. It's the same thing. Like if you get told, hey, you can't do something, well, so what? Go and show them that you can do it.
Right.
And it's not proving to them, it's proving to yourself that you can do it. And watch that business grow. I think I'm getting off on a tangent. I apologize, but
No, not at all. I think this is something that happens a lot with beginning entrepreneurs. And it's they have an idea for something they want to exist. And so they'll go full speed ahead making that thing. And when it's done, they present it to the world and nobody wants it. And so I think and this is, kind of coming back to our finding the middle point conversation. There's a middle point between having an idea, some value, some unique thing that you can bring to the world, and then also putting down your preconceptions and just listening for a while. A lot of early stage entrepreneurship looks a lot like anthropology in the sense of just going out into the world, keeping your eyes and your ears open, and noticing what people are frustrated about, how they're expending effort or time or energy that they don't need to, hassles, things that just annoy people. All of those things are clues that can give you some insight into what would make a successful business. But you have to be willing to take a step back from what you think people want or what you think people are going to benefit from, and actually get to the point of listening long enough and taking it seriously to pick up those pieces of information that are out there in plain sight. You just have to look for them.
Someone wise said to me, he's a multi-millionaire, highly successful in business. And he said to me, number one thing that you've got to do is figure out your why and then serve others. He said the moment that you focus on yourself, then your business starts going down, starts declining. You start focusing on other people, how you can service them. Kind of like what Steve Jobs did with Apple. Like he found a need and he just served people and he changed their lives, hopefully for the better.
Hopefully, yeah.
But he connected the world, and he did that because he wanted to make a difference. He saw that vision. So anyway, steering the conversation a little bit towards your second book, which I'm curious about, The First 20 Hours, How to Learn Anything Fast. Now, I'm a slow learner. Oh, sorry. I always like to say with certain things I'm a fast learner, but with other things I'm a very slow learner, like math.
Totally.
So, can you share what are the secrets, these tips and tricks to actually learn things quickly?
Yeah. Okay. This is a big topic,
Yes.
and something that I was very excited to dig into the research on. So what I've noticed is that a lot of what is talked around in terms of skill focuses on the when you get really good at it part. Like, what does it take to become a gold medalist at the Olympics or, chess world champion or whatever? And the answer to that is a lot of practice over a very long period of time. I don't think that part is necessarily a mystery. The thing that fascinates me is that, say there's something you want to learn how to do. Maybe this is something for work. Maybe this is something for your personal life or for fun. How do you go from knowing nothing, no experience, no knowledge, no skill whatsoever, to being pretty good, maybe not world class, but pretty good in a very short period of time? And so this became another one of my research projects, which was digging into the literature and research on skill acquisition and figuring out how can we do this well and how can we do it faster. The first thing that's really important to understand is that knowledge and skill are two completely different things. So knowledge is ideas in your head. having some conceptual understanding of what a topic is, how it works. So for example, The Personal MBA is a book about business knowledge. It's helping upgrade the business software in your brain, for lack of a better analogy. So when you get to the practice of doing business, you have a working set of knowledge to draw from that will help you make better decisions. That's the whole point. That is not business skill. Business skill comes about, or skill in anything for that matter, comes about as a result of practicing what you want to do in specific ways. So being able to perform a specific task in the world in a reliable, consistent, repeatable way. And skill is one of those areas that has a deep research literature that isn't really talked about very much. And it's fascinating because what the research literature says is that the point of our most rapid improvement happens at the very beginning. So if you think about improvement in performance per unit time, that is concentrated at the beginning. You can go from nothing to being reasonably good in a very, very short concentrated period of time if you do it well, if you do it consistently. And so for me, the question became, okay, like, well, what does that look like? It's not years, it's not months. It's about 20 hours of focused practice. And the valuable thing about this to know is that it's universal and generalizable. So it doesn't matter what you're learning. Could be a physical or a motor skill, could be a cognitive skill. So say something like programming or touch typing, things like that. Touch typing is kind of a cognitive motor skill combined, which is cool. Or like, so think like chess is the example of a mental skill, purely mental skill. So the really cool thing about this is there's a way to going about learning something that you want to learn how to do in a focused, efficient, effective way. And the end result of that is going from knowing absolutely nothing to being reasonably good in a short period of time. And the best part of that is that, kind of similar, we were talking earlier about businesses. People get frustrated way too early. They say, well, I'm obviously not good at this. And then they put it aside, or they quit their podcast in the first month because they don't have enough listeners, that kind of thing. People, this is a universal thing around skills, particularly adult learners, because adult learners are not used to feeling dumb, are not comfortable feeling like they're not performing well. It's very, very frustrating. And adults, contrary to kids, if you ever watch a kid on a skateboard just like throw themselves at the thing over and over and over again, and they crash and fall and they laugh and they just get back up and do it over again. That's a very constructive response to learning a new skill. But adults don't tend to approach it that way. We're like, try to do something, it doesn't work out. It's like, man, just not good at this. Just don't have the talent. I shouldn't waste my time. I should go do something that I'm better at doing. What's really interesting, I call this, in the first 20 hours, I call this the frustration barrier. So for adult learners, the first few hours of practice are almost always just pure hell. Absolutely frustrating. You want to give up very early because you have an idea in your head of what skill looks like. You know what you're supposed to be able to do. And the contrast between that and watching yourself do this thing for the first time is often very extreme. And so for adult learners, there's this barrier there's a certain amount of frustration that you are going to experience and that you have to get through in order to get to the point where you're performing reasonably well. And the reason I use reasonably well as a threshold is when you're performing reasonably well, that's when things start to be more fun. That's when things start to be more interesting because you see yourself doing this thing that you want to be able to do. And that's kind of cool. And you want to keep doing that and see how far you can push it. So that first 20-ish hour period is absolutely critical in terms of your ability to do this thing at all. But then once you're able to push through that frustration barrier, the rest of the improvement process becomes much easier. And so I focused the research in the first 20 hours about that critical early learning period. How do you push through the frustration barrier? How do you get as good as possible, as quickly as possible? So it goes from being frustrating into being fun and interesting.
That is fascinating, because I know for me, and when, like, because we get frustrated a lot, and I like this this first 20 hours thing. It's fascinating to me. What was this something that you like conducted on yourself? Like figured out, okay, it's 20 hours for me, so it must be 20 hours for everybody else? Or is there actual science behind it?
It was a combination. So the research literature talks about something called the power law of practice, which talks about what I said earlier, the biggest improvement per unit time happens at the beginning. So in terms of graph, let me see if I can do this reversed. Kind of goes like this. If skill is the y-axis, it goes up really quickly, and then you kind of plateau off at a certain level. And so when you look at like chess grandmasters, they had that early improvement, and then the plateau is like maybe several decades long, but they've just continued to inch up over a very long period of time. So the power law of practice is in that early period. It's the period where you go from here to here. And so what I wanted to do is that there a lot of discussion around skill acquisition was focused around this idea that was the research literature comes from Anders Ericsson, who is a psychology professor, popularized by Malcolm Gladwell in a way that wasn't necessarily true to the actual research literature behind it. But it was one of those things that at the time everybody was talking about, 10,000 hours to become an expert, yada, yada, yada. So the question for me was that, okay, let's grant that as true. So if you put a lot of time and effort into something, can you become one of the best in the world at it? Yes, absolutely. At that point, does things like genetics or talent play a big role? Yeah, like if you're an Olympic sprinter, having your Achilles tendon be a little bit longer, like a millimeter longer, might make a difference. But for people, the vast majority of the skill acquisition that people pursue on a daily basis is not becoming the best in the world at something. It's picking up something that they've never done before and trying to figure out how to do it. So the question for me, which there's not a whole lot of research literature on, is how long does that take? What level of investment can you expect to go from zero to something reasonable? And so that's how I found the power law of practice. Like, this is a relationship that exists across skills. Doesn't matter what you're trying to do, you're always going to see this happen. And so that's when I started doing self-experimentation about this. And I picked up a whole bunch of different skills and put this to the test. And so what I found for me is that 20 hours, which is just roughly speaking about 40 minutes a day for a month, is enough time to see astounding dramatic improvement in pretty much anything that you're doing. I found, depending on the skill, the frustration barrier is often the most severe up until the 4 or 5 hour mark in terms of concentrated, deliberate practice. And then everything got easier from there. So yeah, just there's a certain amount of, it depends on what you're trying to do, and it depends on how much practice you're throwing at this in what period of time. But as a general rule of thumb, there is nothing preventing you from choosing to learn or choosing to pick up a skill that matters to you and dramatically improving your ability in that particular area in about 20 hours.
Practice makes what? Not perfect, progression.
Yes, practice makes improvement. Practice always makes improvement. And practicing in a smart way, which is a lot of what the method in the book is about, can help you get those improvements in a much shorter period of time.
Mm.
And so, one of the things that I talk about very early in the book that's really important is that deciding what you want to be able to do, it sounds like such common sense.
Yeah.
But when you actually look at how people go about the process of learning something new, they have this vague and nebulous idea of what might be cool and very, very little, like no criteria that they would be able to look at their actual performance and say, yes, I am doing this, I am performing at this level or not. And so, just deciding what you want to be able to do, deconstructing the skill into smaller parts. So you don't have to practice the whole thing at once. You're practicing very small sections of the skill at a time. Doing a little bit of research. So we talked about earlier the distinction between knowledge and skill. Knowledge is not skill, but knowledge can help you practice in a more efficient way. It helps you know what to look at and what good performance looks like. Research is also a little bit dangerous because there's a word for too much research. It's called procrastination, because research is not practice. You need to get to the point where you are doing the thing. So the general rule for research is a question that I love. It's how quickly can you start making mistakes? How quickly can you, yes, pick up a book, watch a video, talk to somebody who has experience in this area, but do that for an hour or two, and then jump into trying to do the thing you're trying to do. And then the rest of the method relies a lot on behavioral psychology. And so the first thing that you can do is remove barriers to practice. So all of the things that are keeping you from sitting down and spending some focused time and attention practicing the thing you want to be good at. And then pre-committing to 20 hours of focused practice. And the reason that pre-commitment is so important is because of the frustration barrier that we just talked about. If this particular skill is not important or valuable enough for you to say, okay, I am going to invest 40 minutes a day on average for the next month. In the grand scheme of things, it's probably not important enough for you to focus on.
No.
The pre-commitment allows you to say, even if it's difficult, even if it's frustrating, even if I want to quit, even if it looks like it's not working, I'm going to practice for this amount of time minimum before I decide to change my strategy. If I get to the end of 20 hours and I'm still terrible, I have full permission to quit, but I am not going to quit until I get to that point. And what I found is that alone, going into the process with that mindset and that strategy, makes it much, much more likely that A, you're going to persist long enough to see results, and you practice long enough to see substantial improvement.
You've written 2 books already. What made you decide to write a 3rd book in the first place?
So my book ideas come from things that enter my brain and I just can't let it go for whatever reason. So they're usually projects that I want to exist or that I've been looking for in some way, and they just don't seem to be there. So after a certain point, thinking about it for so long, all right, if this is going to exist, I need to be the person to make this. And so I was thinking a lot at the time when I wrote my 3rd book, How to Fight a Hydra, about a cluster of topics that are all interrelated. And those topics are ambition, uncertainty, risk, and fear of the unknown. And so ambition seems to be self-explanatory, right? We all have things we aspire to achieve or want to do, or things that would be really cool if they happened. A lot of times those things are intrinsically difficult. We know before we get started that it's going to take a lot of work. The success of it is not guaranteed. And so there's a certain element of risk there. What if we try and it doesn't work? There's a certain amount of uncertainty. We don't know what we don't know coming into this project. And there's fear of the unknown. Like maybe you've never done anything like this before. Maybe you don't exactly know what you're doing. Maybe you need to get the support of people, and you know that that's going to be a challenge going in. And I think one of the interesting things about life in general is that uncertainty and risk are intrinsic parts of the experience of being a human being. It's part of the fabric of reality. It's not something you can hack. It's not something that you can ignore or work around. There are things that we can do to manage risk and manage uncertainty, but there's nothing we can do to get rid of it. And so thinking a lot about those topics, and then the ambition and the fear of the unknown, those are psychological topics. That's about our response to what it is we want and what the world outside is giving us in terms of feedback. And so I was thinking about this cluster of topics and trying to think, my approach to writing a book is generally research-based. So go look at the literature, try to find something useful, and then communicate it in a format where it's clear and valuable and accessible to a reader who has not read the original research literature. What I found with How to Fight a Hydra is that writing a book about uncertainty and risk and fear of the unknown is a very straightforward way to write a book that nobody wants to read because they're intrinsically uncomfortable topics. We want to feel like we're going to be able to achieve the things we want to change, but really wrapping your mind around there are elements of the world you don't control. There are things going into a project that you cannot anticipate. It freaks people out. And so I started writing this book. My first draft, like reading through and working with my editors, like this is not working. This is really not working. And so I still remember where I was when I had the idea. I was in my kitchen, and I had just read Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. Excellent book, highly recommended, where he takes the idea of, it's kind of a mix of procrastination and acrosia, like having a hard time getting yourself to do creative work. He personified that, and he called it the resistance. And so in the book, like having this as almost taking this concept and making it an entity, some outside of yourself. And I was thinking about that, and I started mulling over, like, what if we take this bundle of stuff, this bundle of ideas, and instead of making it abstract concepts, what if we make it an entity? And I came up with the idea, the metaphor of a Hydra, the classical Greek mythology monster with multiple heads. And Hydras have some interesting features. So if you're not careful, when you cut one of the Hydra's heads off, 2 more grow in its place. It's a wonderful, very visceral metaphor for these scary, complex, oh my gosh, how do I even approach this thing? As an organizing idea. And so, yeah, my third book, How to Fight a Hydra, became my first fiction book, which I never expected in a million years to write. But it turned into this interesting allegorical story of, instead of talking about, here's what the research literature tells us about how to handle uncertainty and risk and fear of the unknown, this story has a protagonist. The protagonist wants to do something really difficult and is in the process of dealing with uncertainty, risk, and fear of the unknown. And you see the protagonist deal with those challenges in a skillful way. And so it became this super interesting way of approaching this very valuable but very uncomfortable topic.
I like that, man. So how do you actually fight a Hydra if you cut off its head and then 2 more appear? So what's the I guess the secret to I guess overcoming or beating a Hydra? Can you officially beat a Hydra and kill it? Like in terms of the analogy of your fears and all your desires and this all pursuit of actually wanting something like your ambitions, is it actually possible to defeat the Hydra?
Yes. Yeah. So the classical mythology answer is that you can't just cut off a Hydra's head. This goes all the way back to the Herculean myths. Mm. And so the answer is that you cut off the head, but that's not the only thing you do. You take a torch and you put it over the wound, so you seal up where the head would grow back. And that is something that we see very often, going back to our previous conversation about business. There's a step called consolidation. So this is an idea, and I talk about in the personal MBA, called the sustainable growth cycle, where we have any healthy person or healthy business goes through these cycles, and the cycle is, you have a growth step, right? You're pushing towards the thing that you want. You're preparing to take that next step. There's a lot of energy that goes into growth. Then you have a point where you are actively taking advantage of the opportunities you've created. And then there is a consolidation step or a maintenance step. You lock in the gains that you have created. You take a step back, you reevaluate. And then, and only then, once you've locked in those gains, you go back to the beginning and the growth cycle starts again. And so in the Hydra analogy, you prepare, you take advantage, you make some progress, and then you consolidate your progress, and then you retreat and recover and recoup some energy so you can go back and continue the cycle again. And so a lot of these very ambitious projects, the primary attribute that determines success or failure, like we talked about the other day, is persistence. It's deciding you're going to do something, it's valuable to you, and you're going to last as long as it takes to get the things done. Even if there are setbacks, even if there are things that you didn't expect, environmental circumstances that you need to deal with. Going into those, you don't know which ones are going to show up, but you do know that some of them are going to show up. So there's a certain amount of, also going back to our conversation of first 20 hours, there's a pre-commitment that happens. This is something I want to do. I am going to commit to the process of getting this result. And then it becomes a matter of persistence, doing it over and over and over again, making some progress, consolidating your results, and then doing it over and over again.
That makes a lot of sense, especially the persistence part.
It works.
100% it does. Like for me, I've seen it, like I've lived it.
Yeah.
And I know how powerful persistence actually is, which is why I talk about it so often. And I'm writing 2 books about it, is because persistence is so important. Like it gets you to places you never thought was possible, but you have to have that mindset of, okay, in order for me to overcome this fear right now that I have, it can be anything, fear of not being good enough, fear of going into business. I know for me, it was a fear of actually starting something and thinking I was going to fail at it. But failure is not a bad thing if you decide to look at it from a very different point of view. You got to look at, first off, you got to be persistent at looking at things from a very different point of view than what you would originally think in the first place. You got to be persistent at working towards overcoming the fear every single day. Change is going to happen regardless of whether we want it to or not. It's going to be inevitable. Same with pain. I know I think your analogy is spot on. The fighting of the Hydra, you feel like you're being surrounded by this massive evil and beast that you feel like you can't face up to it.
Yeah.
And I think Hercules, he didn't give up, did he? As the legend goes, he found himself a way. Hercules is the persistence. Why don't you become persistent in your life and see what's going to happen? Guaranteed, you will be able to beat, for the sake of a better analogy, the Hydra in your life, whatever it is. So,
yeah, and I think a lot of people forget that there was a point in the Hercules story where it looks like he's going to lose. He hadn't figured out the consolidation step. He got a little bit of help with that from a mentor. And so, yeah, when you're walking into a big, scary, complex project where you don't have everything figured out, there's a certain amount of exploration and experimentation that has to happen. It's part of the process. You are not going to know everything you need to do in order to succeed. And when that experimentation doesn't go well or doesn't go according to plan, that can be very, very frustrating.
Oh yeah.
But it's important to know that you are absolutely not alone in that. Everybody who does anything meaningful in life has the experience of being overwhelmed, feeling like it's not going to work, experiencing serious setbacks or costs. All of that is completely normal.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot of value in knowing and understanding, particularly when you're going through something like this. You're not alone. You're not the only one who has dealt with things like this. This is an intrinsic part of the process. It's necessary. If it were easy, A, it probably wouldn't be worth much, and B, other people would have done it before you were doing it. So the difficulty is a part of the opportunity. And just by understanding that, I think it takes a lot of the pressure off, or a lot of the feelings of like, am I really cut out for this? Is this something that I really should be doing? I think, and this is where getting into the broader society and culture perspective, there are a lot of messages that we get from all corners of society that say it should work the first time. It should look easy. It should look like, you have everything under control. You know exactly what you're doing. It's very uncomfortable for people to even admit to themselves, like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm not sure if any of this is going to work. And people treat that as a problem that they need to hide instead of, no, I'm trying to do something difficult. I'm having difficulty. That's an expected part of the process. And if I just keep going, as long as the end result, or what I expect to get out of it, as long as the end result is worth it, I just need to keep trying things until I find something that works.
That's good. What would you say is your biggest fear, Josh?
My biggest fear. I've been dealing with a lot of fear recently. And this gets into some things that are going on in personal life. I wrote about this on my site. I can send you a link to it. I've had some pretty substantial health issues over the past decade plus. And so talking about writing How to Fight a Hydra in terms of metaphors for dealing with complex, scary things that you're not sure that you're willing or you're able to overcome. That one was mine and still is to a certain extent. And what's interesting is this is not a project that I chose. It is a project that is an intrinsic part of life for me, and that I need to keep working on, to keep trying new things, to try to keep making things better. So just for context, I have felt tired for the past 10 years, and nobody knows why. And so a lot of the debugging process for myself is trying to alter parts of my life, alter diet, alter medication, alter supplements, alter things to not even to feel good, to get from rock bottom to like neutral and functioning. And so it's been really interesting. Talk about a project where you cut off one head and two more grow. It ended up being a really good metaphor for things like that. And I think Hydra was a book that ties up a lot of my previous research in a way that's useful in a different context. But it also, I wrote that book for me as a way of kind of processing what's been happening over the past couple of years and trying to find trying to find the useful bits of this very difficult experience. And so that's a long way of saying that that my fear for a long time has been this particular issue, whatever the root cause of it is something that there is not an answer to, and that nothing that I will do helps, or can help, or can fix what's going on. And I think that I'm not there yet. There are still things that I can improve, but I've come a long, long way in trying to discover things that work, and then also doing that in a way that lets me do all of the other things that I enjoy. So, like, for example, 2 or 3 years ago, scheduling an advance time and date to sit here and talk with you was within the bounds of probably not a good idea, because my ability to forecast into the future, what's my body state going to be on this day at this time, pretty low. Nowadays, it's actually pretty good. So there has been a lot of improvement, and unfortunately, those fears have not been realized.
I can relate to the health aspect quite a bit. Like, if you were to hear, this is not to take away from your fear, but I think one of my biggest fears was one of those health issues would actually catch up to me and end my life, to the point where it's not necessarily for me, but it's for those people that are going to miss me when I leave. Like my friends and family. Like, all of a sudden Jay's gone. What are they going to think? Like, I know people have that resiliency to sort of move on in the moment, but for me, it's just about trying to take care of myself as best as I possibly can now. And like, I've almost died 3 times.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
No, man. I look at that, and each and every time that it's almost happened, I'm thankful that I didn't, because now I can share that with other people to help encourage them and say, I'm only here because, number 1, God saved me. Number 2, I'm persistent as heck. I don't give up. And I could have given up so many times. And I have this analogy, sink or swim.
Yeah.
And I ask people this all the time, and most often than not, people say, oh, I'd rather swim. Of course you'd rather swim. It's nice. No one likes to sink, because sinking is that feeling of failing. It's that feeling of this pressure on top of you. It's that feeling of pain, anxiety, that kind of analogy, And I always say to people that it is much better for you to sink first, because then you get stronger in knowing how to swim. And whenever you go through a health battle or whatever it is, I always say, never give up, never stop never stop sinking, because in sinking, you get stronger. Yeah. So keep fighting it. I know you might be afraid and anxious, and you may not have the answers to your questions, but keep fighting the Hydra. Don't ever give up. Like, Hercules didn't know at first how to kill it, but he kept going. And eventually he got to that point where he was able to kill it. So your time is coming, my friends. I have no doubt. And this is one of the things that I talk about in my book as well, is the value of patience. Like, we oftentimes want things to happen right now, especially when we have pain. We want to get over that pain right now. But instead of focusing on the good that pain is actually building within us, we run from it. So with all my health issues, I spent 4 days blind with one of them. I couldn't see. And the pain was horrendous, but in that moment, I found this amazing inner peace. I found this amazing quiet despite the pain, because I wanted to go there. And I don't know if you believe in God or anything like that, Josh, but for me, I spent those 4 days and this may sound crazy, but I did.
No,
4
sure.
days with God right there beside me saying, "So where are you going, Jay?" I'm curious, where are you going? And I was like, is that this dialogue back and forth? And I was wrestling with my purpose, wrestling with who I was, wrestling with what I wanted. And it's amazing how health issues enable us to just get a new perspective on life. So I don't know if you're able to share a little bit about, I guess, have you had tests done and they still haven't been able to find what's wrong with you?
Yeah, it's a big mystery. And all the signs point to it's a combination of issues that are interacting in unfortunate ways versus like one big thing. Which, it's kind of interesting. I'm going back to when we were talking about systems in the personal MBA. Complex systems don't get more complex generally than the human body. I mean, there's a lot going on. And so, yeah, what's been really interesting is, I think I'm trying to remember, we talked about exploration and exploitation, about trying different things. If it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't, stop doing it. In complex systems, that is a little bit more challenging because something that works in one area can put another system out of whack or cause side effects or, things that you don't understand or control. So it's been really interesting, all the tests or all of the common tests come back negative. So we know certain things aren't wrong, but that doesn't mean that one of the other 5,000 things couldn't be a factor. A medication or supplement that works in one area might cause issues in other ways. How do you get the good parts of whatever it is this thing's doing without provoking the unanticipated consequences? So it's been, I mean, I've been researching and experimenting on myself, guinea pig N of 1 for quite a while. And fortunately, it seems like we're getting to the point where things are more stable and more predictable. I think it's also interesting. I love that we're having this conversation because I think in a lot of contexts, public interview about like you have your audience, I have, my readers, all of the stuff. It would be way easy to just like ignore, pretend this stuff isn't a factor, never happened, not relevant to the book, doesn't help promote things. But I think it's important for people to understand that no matter who you are or what you're doing, certain things are going to happen in your life that you didn't expect, you didn't plan for, you might wish never happened. But you still, like, that's a part of life. You still need to deal with it. It's a part of what it is to be a human being living a complete life. And so this is part of my story. I had plans, if you would have asked me 10 years ago about what I would be spending the vast majority of my time and energy on, none of this would be as part of that 10-year plan. And yet, the time and energy that I've spent doing this debugging on myself, in the grand scheme of things, is the most productive, useful thing that I can do for myself and for all of the people that I help through my work. And same for you, right? Like, if health is an active concern, the best thing that you can do for yourself and others is to take care of you in whatever ways you need to be taken care of. And that's not a distraction. It's not something that you should be ashamed of or hide or whatever. It's just a fact of reality and something that is very constructive for everybody involved.
I think also trying to get to a place that at the end of the day, no matter what happens, everything is going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter, and that's what I've realized in life is that if I go tomorrow, I know that I've done everything that I can today, in the present moment because I'm not guaranteed of a tomorrow. I mean, just getting in the car and driving, like you just don't think, but you're always thankful. But I think also just looking at your life right now, what it is, what you actually have been able to do and accomplish, how many people you've been able to help, especially with your story, Josh. I mean, this is great. I mean, this is the kind of things that I love talking about, because there's so much value here. There's so much wisdom behind it. And I think that with your story and everything that you're going through, it's inspiring. It really is. Because I know what it's like to feel tired. I know there's quite a few people actually listening to this that might actually feel like they're tired too. Like they don't have a way to be untired and get that energy back.
Yeah.
You know, but there is always a way. You just got to work towards finding that way and going back to, I guess, trying to master it. You know, you are the master of your own choices, and you got to oftentimes live with the consequences of those choices and those decisions. And I think the best thing I can share for this, Josh, and I want your advice on it as well, but I came up with a method that I call the CAP method. So
Okay.
CAP. C stands for choice, A stands for acceptance, and P, guess what, stands for persistence.
Persistence, yeah.
Yes. So whenever you can apply this to, I guess, if you struggle, if you're in addictions and I applied it to mental health and depression and everything that I went through. But first off, you got to understand that ultimately life is a gift. It's free will. You have the choice to accept your reality for what it is right now, or you can choose to accept that you can be so much more than what you are right now. And in order to get to a place where you feel that you are happy, satisfied, fulfilled, you've got to be persistent each and every day. You've got to put on a cap, as it were, as the analogy is, on all the negative in your life, and keep that cap as tight as possible by being persistently closing it. Just keep closing it as tight as you can every single day, because 100% that cap is going to loosen. And the moment it loosens, or the moment that cap is opened up again, you've allowed it to. That's your choice, because you've stopped being persistent.
Yes.
So continue being persistent, my friend. And I am so thankful to hear that, you are taking each day, you're becoming better. It's inspiring for me to hear. So thank you so much for sharing that, man.
Yeah, totally. I think the other grand thing to take away from all of this, which is helpful in a wide variety of circumstances, even if you are not struggling with health issues, there's a tendency for a lot of people to compare themselves and their experience to what other people seem to be experiencing. And those comparisons, if you think about them, even for a little bit, they almost never hold up, because other people have different lives, they have different values, different environments, different life circumstances. You can't really compare one human life to another, because there are so many different variables that any comparison just falls flat very quickly. And so there's a valuable mental check step here, or a mental skill that I think is super valuable and very important, which is judging your success based on, have you improved today versus where you were yesterday, a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, 10 years ago. So making comparisons against yourself and trying to improve your daily experience in whatever dimensions you happen to care about. That is valuable and useful and will get you very, very far. The comparisons that will drive you crazy are the looking at somebody else's life and feeling bad because you have not, for whatever reason, done the thing that fill in the blank other person has done. So what's really interesting from my perspective, business background, interest in entrepreneurship, building businesses, all of those things. I have a lot of very close friends who have built fantastic businesses. that are very similar in some instances to what I planned to do 10 years ago. The not skillful way to think about that is, oh my gosh, look at what I've lost, right? All of my friends have been able to do this and feel envy and anger and disappointment. I don't envy people their business success. I envy them their health that allowed them or enabled them to do the things that were necessary in order to reach this goal. That is a very dangerous line of thinking and of emotion, because the reality of the situation is, in my context, in my environment, my body state, the things that I've needed to deal with on a day-to-day basis to get from 10 years ago to today, different to the point of non-applicability to all of those other people that I've been thinking about it. So the much better way of thinking about it is, no, 10 years ago, I was in real rough shape. And every day since this issue has occurred, I've been working and doing everything under my power to resolve the issue and make sure it never comes back. And when I look at my current state today, my current capabilities today, the improvement has been very significant. It's been a major accomplishment. It's not how I planned to spend the past decade, but adjusting to this unfortunate series of circumstances that have occurred, there's been some really very real progress and deep success along the way in making progress on this thing. So yeah, the comparing yourself to yourself or your past self, there's a wonderful little quirk I picked up years ago, which is to think of yourself every year as a different version of yourself. So, you know, when a lot of these, the situation cropped up, it got really bad in like 2013, 2014. Josh 2014 and Josh 2020 are completely different people. And I think, you know, doing that little, you know, Josh 2020 subscript on myself is a really kind of nice way of doing the mental comparison to past versions of you, and really, you know, taking an honest look at, you know, is it looking like Josh 2021 is going to be in a better situation than Josh 2020? Yeah, that means I'm headed in the right direction. And so, but yeah, just dropping the comparisons with other people, focusing on how can you make the next version of you even better. That's a very constructive mindset to have.
Absolutely, man. I love that takeaway. It's so important. Josh, my last two questions for you. These ones, I'll ask this one first. So this is my legacy question. So I usually ask this at the end of all my conversations because I feel like it's a powerful question. But you've been able to reach the age of 100 and your friends have put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. And asked me how they got it all. We'll just call it magic, but they just did. And they showed it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
It's a really good question. I think that a large part of that for me is family. So that I had a wonderful relationship with my wife and with my kids, and that they are happy, well-functioning, successful under whatever definition of successful is meaningful to them, people, and that I was an influence or a part of that for them. And I think in the broader context, I wish for other people, and I think this is a big part of the motivation. I wish for other people what I wish and hope for myself, which is I want to understand the world. I want to make good decisions. I want to make things around me better. And I hope through my work in trying to understand the world and make things better and all of that, I hope that my work helps other people do that same thing for themselves in their context with their goals. And so, yeah, in terms of legacy, I don't know. Books are weird things. Like they get to places in the world that you would never expect, into the hands of people that you've never met, and put towards goals that you could never anticipate, which is part of their magic. I don't know how my work is going to affect other people, but I hope that other people are able to use it to understand the world a little bit better and to be a little bit more skillful in terms of how they go about their daily life, interacting with the people in their world, and moving toward the accomplishment of whatever ends are meaningful to them. And I hope as a result, they are able to get to the end of their lives looking back and saying, that was a really good run, and I did it in a way that I'm proud of, and that was important and meaningful and valuable to me and the people around me. If I'm able through my work to do that, then that is I can't imagine a much better way to go through a career.
Wow. I don't even know how I'm going to end with that response. Okay. I'll ask you a much lighter hand note question, because that was deep, man. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's
Sure.
a powerful legacy to leave. This is a fun question. So, what is the weirdest food combination you've ever tried?
The weirdest food combination I've ever tried. I have made some absolutely terrible ice cream sundaes at various points in my life. I think at one point I tried ketchup on vanilla ice cream just to see how that would go. Yeah, I don't recommend it. I was very young at the time, in my defense. But yeah, like ice cream goes well with everything, so you might as well try everything on ice cream and see how it works. Yeah, there have been some interesting, like, more recently trying different combinations of tea, and some of them work out really well and some of them really don't. Like
I did
like
that.
peach flavored tea that if you mix it with green tea, it doesn't really work. Like, it sounds great, but it's really kind of nasty. Yeah, this you can see this deep thread of experimentation of, like, let's throw a bunch of things together and see how it works. Yes, there have been a lot of not so great combinations as a result of that.
That's how the best chefs are created, in my opinion.
Yep. My daughter, she's almost 10, and that's her new favorite thing. Like, let's just get out a bunch of things from the refrigerator and freezer and blend them all together and see how it goes. So it's nice to see this inclination being passed down and encouraged in the next generation.
I think my kids one day will be like, "Dad, why are you putting that on that?" I'm like, "Don't mock it till you try it."
Why would you not put that on that?
Exactly. For me, have you ever had chips and ice cream as well?
Chips and ice cream are pretty good, actually. Yeah, I guess it would depend on the chips. Like, there's a sweet potato chip that I really like that would go really well with ice cream.
I've actually never tried sweet potato chips with ice cream, funny enough. Like, I think I've always just gone for the normal potato chip, like Macca's chips.
Mm-hmm.
Those ones, like with the Macca's soft serve, we call it Macca's McDonald's. So basically, like we just used to smash it all the time. But nowadays, we got more fancier taste than just McDonald's. We go to like a Baskin and Robbins or gelato place, and Josh, we get the some of my all-time favorite chips from this place down the road from my house. So I bring back this gelato. I get some of those chips. I don't know what they do to it, but they just make it so good. put it with this gelato, and it could be any flavor of gelato, and it's like heaven on earth. It's the best thing ever. Another quirky thing that I like doing as well is I have a massive sweet tooth, but this is one thing that I do that's really, really weird. I actually get these crackers, and they're like quinoa crackers or just normal rice crackers, whatever, which one. And I put butter, peanut butter, cheese, and sometimes I'll put honey or I'll put ice cream on it as well.
Okay.
And strangely enough, it works. Maybe it's just me. Like, I don't know, but it works. And oftentimes, like as a mini treat or snack, I'll have that, and be quite satisfied.
Yeah, my version of that is that. So I live in northern Colorado, and there is a barbecue sauce company called Grumpy's, which is made relatively close to here. It's like an hour drive south in a town called Longmont, and so Grumpy's barbecue sauce goes with everything.
Oh,
you can't really combine it with something that it would not turn out delicious. And so that's the new family joke that I'll just eat Grumpy's barbecue sauce.
you live off Grumpy's. Oh, I love it.
I wish they were public, because I would buy stock in Grumpy's and probably single-handedly raise their stock price just by.
That's like me and donuts and cookies, man. Like, I kid you not, there's two companies here in Sydney that whenever you're here, I'll take you to them. And the first company, they make the best donuts I've ever had in my life. And I'm a huge connoisseur of donuts. And when I found this place and I had them, I'm like, how in the world do you make these donuts, man? Like, what's the secret? He wouldn't tell me. Still hasn't told me. And
okay.
I'm still trying to get it out of him today. But the second one is thick cookies. Now, New York style, big style.
Mm-hmm.
He's basically taken that concept and done it here in Sydney, Australia, and just made it better, in my opinion. He's just like enhanced the richness, the flavors, the ingredients as well. They're all premium ingredients. Like nothing. The flour is premium flour. It's like organic flour. It's all expensive products into one cookie. And even the chocolate, man. Like the chocolate's from Belgium. Like you can't get too much better than Belgium chocolate, in my opinion. And since our family is from Germany, so we say that like, yeah. But then the butter as well that they use, it's like there's only 3 places in the world that you should really get butter from, and one of them's New Zealand. So he gets it from New Zealand, and when you actually try it, oh man, like the addiction is real.
I have a real soft spot in my heart for companies who decide to do something conventional, but then they take all of the quality knobs and they turn it all the way up to 11. I love everything about that. When you come to Fort Collins, there's a company called Foco Doco, which is the Fort Collins Donut Company.
Oh,
and they have a donut robot.
What?
That automates the process of making donuts, and they will make them fresh in front of you as like to your specifications while you're at the window. It's very entertaining, and they're delicious. So when you come to Fort Collins, we have a place to visit.
I cannot wait, man. That's a massive incentive to really just go like, COVID, hurry up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stopping me from getting my damn donuts from America. And obviously spending time with you, Josh, but yeah, I mean, far out.
Sounds good. We'll
Josh,
plan
my
on.
friend, it's been an absolute pleasure once again speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time. Just want to acknowledge you and say thank you very much for who you are and everything that you're doing. You're changing a lot of lives, and thank you so much for changing mine today. So I don't know if I asked where can people find you the last time, where can people connect with you and learn more about you?
Yeah, the best place to go is joshkaufman.net. So that's where you can find all of my latest research writing, as well as links to all three of our books: Personal MBA, First 20 Hours, and How to Flip Hydra.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that's all linked below. Thank you so much, Josh, for coming on the Storybox podcast.
Jay, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for the invitation.